As ever for this video, head into the next folder and we're going to look at number 4, which is storing data with variables. So let's open up this file and also copy the path for the browser too. Paste this in and we'll see the title of variables up at the very top. Up to now in this course, we've been setting or changing values, such as updating this title just here. In JavaScript and most other languages too, we regularly have the need to store our data. JavaScript provides us with 3 main ways of doing this. Let's begin by looking at the traditional way of storing data in JavaScript, which is the variable. We can create a variable by using the var keyword, just like this, followed by a name for this variable. So I'm going to call mine new text, and this is a way to reference this variable in the future. Adding a name like this is called a declaration, since we are declaring a new variable. You can think of a variable as a storage container, and this name we give to it is kind of like the label on the front, so we can easily find it in the future. It also makes sense to be descriptive when naming variables. It should reflect the data which it contains. Also, this name cannot contain spaces like this. It must also begin with a letter, a underscore, or a dollar symbol. If we add something which is not allowed, such as a /, usually a modern text editor like this will pick up on this and warn us of this error. We can then use this equals symbol to add a value which we want to store inside of this variable, such as our string of text. And since this is a string, we add this in the quotations. Let's say new text from variable. So what we've done here is we've used this equals to assign this value over on the right to this variable name over on the left. And adding a value to our variable just like this is referred to as initialization. You don't need to remember these keywords, but I just want to make you aware that these exist. So this is initializing a variable, and before we just had the variable declaration. And then to make use of this text, all we need to do is to pass in the variable name just like this. Give this a save and refresh. And there's our new text which was stored inside of the variable. But what if we also wanted to change this value which is stored inside this variable? We can easily do this too. Since our variable is already created, what we need to do this time is to access the variable name without the var keyword. The program already knows this is a variable since we declared it above, so the var keyword is not required. Again, using the equals, we can update this with a new value. Let's say updated text. Give this a save and check this out in the browser. There's our updated text now showing. So the order here is important too, since the code is read from the top down to the bottom. So the first line, we create our variable. Line 2, we update it. And then the title is changed to our new updated text. If we were to do something like this and move the update to be above where we declared our variable, let's see what happens when we save and refresh. We no longer see the updated version inside the browser, and this is often why we will see variable declarations up at the top of the script, so it won't cause any problems if we start to update this later on in our file. Variables can also hold other data types too, not just strings, and we will discover more data types very soon. But for now, there is 2 more types of variables alongside this var keyword, which we're going to look at. And both of these were introduced with ES 2015. The first one of these is the let keyword. On the surface, let works just like the same as var. It can contain a value, and we can also update this value when required. So if we change var to be let, save and refresh, and we now see the updated text just like we did with the var keyword. There is a difference though between the let keyword and var, and this all comes down to something called scope. Scope relates to how we can access these variables, and it adds some restrictions on how we can access the values stored inside. There is more information on scope later on in the course, where you'll learn all about this in more detail, but we do need to learn a little bit more about JavaScript first, before these will become really clear. Next up, we have the const keyword, which is short for a constant, and you can think of this as holding a constant value which won't change. And if we save this and refresh the browser, we see this will throw an error inside the console. We see the message of assignment to constant variable. But you're getting this because just like var and let, this can also store a value, but it's more of a read-only value. The content inside is not intended to be updated, which we are doing just here. So if we were to remove this line, just like this, and then refresh the browser, and this now gets rid of the error, and we still see our variable contents. So the console error message before was assignment to a constant variable. So just before we tried to update this, we've seen the message was assignment to constant variable. And it's this assignment keyword here, which is the key. Assignment is just a fancy word we give to a variable when we pass it a value just like this. And we have this error because we are trying to reassign it with this value just below. And having this const now introduced into the JavaScript language is a really good thing because it means we can store our values, which we know we don't ever intend on changing. This can stop any errors or bugs in our code if somebody accidentally changes a value later on in the code. But there is something which can be confusing for beginners, and it surrounds creating something called an object using const. If we remove these two lines of code, we can create a new constant called a person. We'll have more detail on objects very soon, but for now you can think of an object as a collection of pieces of data. So a person may have multiple pieces of data such as an age, a name, a height, and these can all be stored inside of these curly braces. And all of these pieces of data are stored inside of multiple properties called key value pairs. So the key is the name of the data, such as a person's name, and the value is the actual name. Separated by a comma, we can add a second key called likes, and then a value of a favorite food. And we can keep going with as many values inside of here as we would like. We can then access any of these properties by first accessing the constant name, and then using the dot to select any one of our properties, such as the name or likes. Let's try this. Refresh, we see the name of Chris, and then person.likes is a way to access the second property of pizza. So although this object is a constant, it's not strictly immutable, meaning it will never change. We can actually update the properties just like this. We can access the person constant and access the key called likes. Let's set this to anything such as bananas. Let's save this, and we still have the person.likes rendering out to the browser. Refresh, and now we can see we've updated our constant with the value of bananas. We could also add additional properties. So ones which already don't exist, we can say person.hair. And set this to a color, then display this inside the browser. So we can see here that we can update the properties inside of our object, but what about if we try to completely change the person to be a different date type such as a string? Let's just change this to be a name such as Chris. Refresh this, and we now see the same error message which we had before, which is a assignment to a constant. So as you can see, a constant holding an object like this can still have its values mutated inside. We just cannot reassign its original value to maybe a number or a string. For this reason, it is often advisable to avoid the confusion by only using const for simple values such as a string or a number, and then we know for sure that this value will never change. So just to recap with everything we've learned in this video, we have three different keywords called var, let, and const, which all allow us to declare a new variable, which is kind of like a storage container for our data. And when using the var and the let keywords, we can optionally assign a value to these names. The values inside can also be updated or reassigned with a new value. There is also some scope and hoisting considerations, which we'll cover later on in the course when we have a little bit more understanding. When using the const keyword, this will also create a new variable or storage container, but the value cannot be reassigned. As a beginner, it can also be confusing when using const and an object, because object properties can be updated, or we can also add new ones too. We've also mentioned some keywords in this video too, and you don't have to remember all of these at the moment. First of all, we had a declaration, and this is when we create or declare a new variable without passing it a value. So for example, we could say var name. We then initialize this variable when we pass it a value such as equals Chris. Assignment. This is when we pass or assign a value to a variable, such as this example down at the bottom, where we assign the value of 37 to the age variable. So these variables are going to be something which we use a lot, so you will get a lot of practice with these through this course. Next, we're going to stick with variables and take a look at how we can mix these with strings.